Good afternoon, America. Good evening, Europe, and good night, Asia. I have the pleasure and honor of having Yi Zhao um, joining me for this chat. You are a colleague, relationship therapist. Welcome to the show. I want to read a little bit from your bio now.
Thank you.
Yi Zhao Martins is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, a mediator, a published author of a parenting book written in Chinese. She is fascinated with how each of us, as unique individuals, relate to others in family settings, romantic relationships, and transitioning out of romantic relationships.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Francesco. Yes,
chatting.
thank you for inviting me. Yes, I'm specializing working with couples that are very different. Like one person has ADHD, for example, where they're interracial couples, or couples in conflict. Very happy to be here to chat with you about couples that we work with and what we see.
Yes, I find that I learn a lot about my work with couples by talking to fellow colleagues like yourself. And
It's a
when
great
we,
way to learn.
yes, and when we first spoke, which wasn't recorded, I felt like really inspired. So I look forward to this chat.
Me too.
Yi, do you find that couples or Western couples, we want to attach that label to because we are based in the UK and the US, are in crisis these days, or what are the trends anyway? Maybe we start from any trends that you observe in your couples counseling practice.
Yes. Well, I'm based in California, San Francisco Bay Area, right? So well, when couples come to me, they're always in crisis. If they're doing well, they don't need my service. And I have to say, a majority of them come to me, it's already pretty late, right? Like they're a couple years into their dysfunctional cycles. They don't have enough tools to talk to each other and to work together as a team, and they're feeling pretty helpless and desperate, right? So I mostly work with heterosexual couples, and unlike before, I think men are the one, the bread earners, and women the one that's the householder. Nowadays, I see a lot of couples that have the reverse role, where they have equal earning powers, and they're still struggling in their roles in the family, how to negotiate and how to designate different works in the household and how to enjoy intimacy. How about you, Francisco?
What you've just said can be said about my practice as well, in terms of I wish a lot of these clients came earlier on to prepare, to do some more of a preparation. I think you have a term that I like, premarital counseling, yes, or preparation. I tend to say preparation for a long-term relationship or preparation for marriage. So it often feels like the couples are discussing values and expectations from different roles, expectation from a man, expectation from a provider, partner, expectation from a husband, from a lover, and again, from a woman, from a mother, from a co-parent. And yes, those expectations about roles are not often discussed at the beginning of the relationship.
Yes. Well, the reality is, Francesco, when two people are in a long-term relationship and then when they have children, when they have a house together, right? They're in multiple roles, right? So a man can be a father, like you said, be a lover, right? Can be a financial provider, or can be financial contributor if they're equally contributing, right? And they need to negotiate those roles all the time. A woman can be a wife, you know, of course, and he or she is also a worker and a friend, right? Daughter, probably in relationship with other people's, right? And so a lot of times when they are having conflict about those roles, it's problematic. One example is, say, if the husband or the man in the relationship wanted to be in a romantic partner role, he wants to have sex, while the woman is stressed about the parenting. They're not in the same page, right? Their roles are in conflict, and of course, their interaction would not be smooth because they don't have the same goal in that time. So yes. There is a very funny show in America that's very popular called Fresh Off the Boat. It talks about the Asian family just moved to America, landing in Orlando, and their immigration history. So there was one episode is Valentine's Day. The mother and the father finally got a babysitter, and then their kids were thinking, well, mommy and daddy will have a romantic time together for Valentine's Day. And they came back home and noticed they're cranking on their tax forms together. So the good news is they're in the same place. They have the same role as for financial partners working on their tax, but they're ignoring their romantic partner role. They're not having any romance on Valentine's Day.
Yes. Even just to focus on the rules when an argument is being discussed in therapy seems to be very helpful. So at that point, I often focus on triggers. So at that point, you were tired, so you were more easily triggered, and you were expecting a nice, homely environment. Second trigger, because you didn't get that. But I'm realizing now the same argument of could also be approached in terms of roles. Yeah.
Yes.
Because like you were saying, she was parenting and she was prioritizing her baby, and also she was physically drained from the day with the baby, and he was maybe already carrying some, I don't know, a few weeks of expectations to have intimacy, and for some reason that night he thought it would happen, but maybe it was gonna happen the day after.
Yes.
Because they were in different
you're
roles.
Right. Yes, you're right. And then you bring up a very good point too, also make me think about that. Men and women are very different. Our brains are very different, right? When we are under stress, we can react differently too. That's also very personal. That depends on our nervous system, right? Some people may go to fight. They really want to fight about their difference. Other people may go to flight. They want to run away. They don't want to talk about it. It's too intense for them, right? And then also when it comes to sex, women and men get turned on differently, right? They can shift gear differently. And then there's disconnection and there's disagreement and there's differences. And all of those are good. They're meaning that we are alive, we're different, we're living lives, we're going through this together. And the process of going to talk about it and to reconnect actually bring people closer.
On that topic, I would imagine, I wonder what you think about this, that 3 babies, a couple, there are differences, gender differences when it comes to what turns different genders on, and so on and so forth when it comes to sex. But then when a baby comes along, that changes things. So maybe we can talk about before babies. What do you find there? I mean, is the more sort of stereotypical, if it's a heterosexual couple, is the more stereotypical romance, and if the evening went really well, it's pretty obvious at what point there would be intimacy. Maybe the gender differences become even more dramatic after there's a baby, because it's not so obvious when to expect intimacy, because it doesn't just require a romantic night, a romantic evening. There are other factors.
Right. Well, that we can talk about what women think, what men think. But I also think there's some neurodivergent there too, right? There's neurodiversity. Each person's brain is different. Their past history with sex is different. Their understanding of intimacy is different. So, with the You+Me movement, consensus is heightened, right, in modern society. So it's all about agreement, a meeting of mind in that moment between the two people. They may very much like having this great expectation for sex, both of them, and at some point it doesn't flow, right? So both of them need to talk about it and be on the same page and relax into the reality of spending time together and let it happen. Sex is like sleeping. You cannot force it. You need to let it happen.
So you were saying we can talk about what women and men say. What did you mean? When it comes to sex, what do you get? What do women tell you? Or
okay, so you want to hear the secret. So most of the time women will say, well, we want to feel pampered, we want to feel heard and seen, we want to feel relaxed, and we want to feel safe, right? And then we want to know that you are going to show up the next day. You're not just going to disappear. If the woman wants more than just sex, they want an attachment, relationship, and the whole big thing, right? A lot of times what I hear, men are not exactly connect sex from relationship and intimacy. Is more coming from like a drive, like a satisfaction and an enjoyment, and be in the moment more. What do you think? As a man?
Obviously, that's very I agree with what you've said. Also, men often need some sort of affection, sort of some sort of a mother role, a motherly some sort of affection,
tenderness.
Yes, that need that femininity, not necessarily full-blown sex, but that feminine presence, the sensual, in order to function. And I sometimes there seems to be a breakdown in what she wants and what he wants, and it's easier said than done. But often with men, if they get the feminine aspect, the sensuality, the making him feel sort of touching him and being soft, then he softens up, and it doesn't need to be sex. I suppose.
So it's connection. I'm hearing is connection.
Connection, femininity.
Yeah.
Seeing the feminine is a treat to see that feminine.
So I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So you're when you mention femininity, meaning the feature of this person is different from mine. Like women, their body tend to be softer, right? And men's body tend to be harder, like more masculine, more body mass there. And the women's movement tend to be more circular, right? Instead of linear. Even women's way of talking and thinking, right? So there's a contrast. I'm hearing is the contrast and the polarity make men, probably make women feel too attracted to each other, right? So if you are too similar, there's a chance you don't feel the attraction as much. But where there's the polarity, you feel the tension, you feel the attraction, and that make you want to become one, make you want to be closer. And when you get to that, it's the process of getting closer that's very attractive. Well, you may not agree, or men may not agree, what they were like, I want a result, an outcome. But at least from my understanding, most women will think with the process of getting closer and feeling safe. Sometimes there's this dance. You get closer, you step back a little bit, and you get closer until you feel totally comfortable and you become one. And you move like one, right? And then that is the ultimate joy for a lot of people, right?
I love
Being
the way you
seen,
describe that.
accepted, right? And comfortable and safe. You have to feel safe in order to really fully experience joy and pleasure.
I love that explanation. Shall we talk about stressors?
Yeah.
Also, I want to acknowledge that most of the couples I work with nuclear families. They don't have neighbors or relatives that can support, particularly when they have children, that can help them with that. And also, in terms of getting your needs met, then a partner becomes the person that you want to have the most meaningful chat with, sex, friendship, financial support, and stability, and so on and so forth, where the village used to help you getting your needs met.
Yeah.
So what
I
are the
agree
stress
with you. Yeah.
On these
What
nuclear
I see,
families?
yeah, from a nuclear family, what I see, well, at least in the Bay Area where I live, right? Unless they are belonging to a certain community, like the Asian community or Latino community, or sometimes Black community, they are still more in touch with raising a child with a village concept, where they have relatively live close by, where, and they operate in a big group. They live near each other, and when their functions, they're very tight, right? A lot of my notice is Caucasian families tend to be very much isolated in some way. Two people, kids, a house. Sometimes they're connecting with their neighbors or their kids, classmates, family, right? To build some relationship and a community that I have seen, which is great, right? But a lot of like the new immigrants where they haven't really built that connection yet. They are really struggling. It's just impossible for two people who are juggling so many roles and just function. Switch off your parent role, switch on your romantic partner role. It sometimes takes some time to really decompress, transition to come back to me and how you're feeling. Go take care of yourself before you can transition to a different role and be romantic and sensual and all that, right? Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. I was thinking
What's
about
like
the
in your
expectations.
couples? Yeah.
With my couples is the expectations. I find that there isn't enough education around what's feasible to expect in the context of the nuclear families, because historically we've had them not for very long. So maybe there is still some higher expectation than we should hold. Again, it's not feasible to expect that one person is gonna excel at all of those roles throughout their lives.
Yes.
Maybe at this
All
point,
the time. Yeah.
right? Maybe that person will become a better communicator in 5 years' time. But in the meantime, that person is so busy working and meeting, fulfilling other roles. So if you expect that person should score high in all of those roles,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then you may feel entitled to break up
Mm-hmm.
because you
Mm-hmm.
feel really
Mm-hmm.
let down.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I hear that, you know, that actually I see similar challenges in my couple, some of my couples, right? Is that, you know, they had a good connection when they're dating, they're really bonded, and then they have children. And then, you know, one of them are having career change. So there's a lot of stressors coming along their way. And then one of the partner expect to have the same kind of a time and connection like before, right? And they were really missing and grieving the loss of that. And this is a healthy grief. When your couple who go through different developmental stage, you need to grieve some of the losses. When you have a young child together, your life will just not be the same. You will lose a lot of freedom and time and connection, all those beautiful things at the beginning of your relationship, right? When you were in a symbiotic state. And then also when people start to develop their own individuality in the couplehood, you will need to grieve that loss too, because for a while they may be offered to take a training, change the career, and they need more time and energy to focus on that first. That doesn't mean they don't love you and they are leaving you. That just means that they need to prioritize that for a little while, right? But that comes to how do you keep connected when you're going through those stresses? It's so important to carve out different times. I tell my couple, you need to have alone time for self. You need to have couple time. You need to have parenting time for sure, right? And of course, you have your work time and social time. So the essentials is couple time and self time. If you don't have that, your relationship will really suffer because your different roles will get squashed, right? It's hard to find time, but two people can sit down, look at their calendar, squeeze in 30 minutes a week at least, right? To say, do whatever that you can do, just hold hands or cuddle or having dinner or watching a show, take a walk. If you prioritize your relationship, that's the thing you have to do. So there's a saying in Chinese, like an old saying. They say, marriage is like an old copper teapot. The more you polish it, the newer it gets. So if you just leave it alone, it gets rusty, right? It gets all green and rusty. So if you polish it often, you dry it out, you polish every day, it will still be new. It will still be precious. It will be heirloom after decades, right?
Yes.
We can't expect it to work by itself. We have to invest in time and energy. And I hate to say it is effort. It is work. Just like every aspect of our life, if you put your energy into that, it will show. If you don't, your relationship flowers starve, right? It withers.
So we seem to agree that Western relationships are in some sort of a crisis, particularly when the nuclear family is involved. And you also illustrating what we really focus on in counseling, talking about values from the outset in order to manage expectations and focusing on communication. So I suppose we are touching on the social aspects, on how society is changing from large families or nuclear families. And the role of men and women has changed as well. We haven't talked about that much. So the societal aspect, and there is also the therapeutic aspect. Whatever is the society background and the family background of origin, then as therapists, we do some type of work focusing on roles, expectations, values, communication. Which direction do you think shall we carry on the conversation? Shall we stay with the societal a bit longer before we focus more on the therapeutic?
Um, I don't feel strongly about either one. What is that you really want to explore today, Francesco?
So I suppose if we're staying with the societal a bit more, is the role of how the role of women and men has changed. I suppose my main comment would be that it's not very clear, and couples are confused as to what is a reasonable setup in terms, particularly after a child comes along, because naturally the mother would need to interrupt her career, which would have a range of consequences often, because she may feel, and I find that often there is this, oh, you went up, you progressed in your career, I made these sacrifices from the family. So there is a need to have that sacrifice being acknowledged and recognized. This is just one of the many facets. I just feel that modern couples, nuclear families, often end up in that place of not feeling appreciated enough, men and women, and also with a sense of being let down, a sense of I am in the right here. Something that was just a fair expectation hasn't been given to me. And there are so many separations after a baby is born, which, fair enough, in itself. What saddens me is that the separation very often comes to a couple that said they believed in long-term relationships. And long-term relationships mean working through difficulties together. But if you feel that you're really being let down and you feel really aggrieved, then that doesn't apply anymore. You feel like, well, you let me down. So, and it's often the end of a relationship at that point. It didn't go by plan. That wasn't the plan, but it's happening.
Yeah. Well, I like that you use the term setup. You're right. The setup is different nowadays. Well, from my observation, at least in Asia, I'm from China. Women's education was highly emphasized for the past decades. So women's educational levels are much higher, and women's social economic status is much higher. There are a lot of very educated, very wealthy women in China nowadays. So, and they decided, I don't need men. I don't want to have children. Why do I want it to be tied down by the family while I can pursue my freedom, my career, my hobbies, my friendship, whatever I want? This is a rebel against the traditional role. You need to go to college, find a job, get married, have babies, and have another one. After the single child policy got got changed, they were encouraged to have a second child, but not many people took that offer because they don't want to sacrifice their career, their life status. They don't want to, it's also very expensive, right? They don't want to put more stressors on their lives. So when you have economic status, when you have that power, it really brings men and women to a very similar level as for negotiation. Just to be real, right? Money really determines a lot of things. So one thing I'm exploring with some of my couples is, yes, you have a difference in your earning capacity, but can you have an equal decision-making power in a household? Just because you contribute less doesn't mean you don't have much to say in the decision-making. What kind of decision you're going to make jointly? What decision you're going to make separately? What kind of the tasks that you are good at, you take on? What are the things that you're both good at and you can share? What are the things none of you want to do? Can you outsource it? Or if you can you split it? So both people feel it's fair, it's equal, that they don't get exploited, right? It's all about talking. with the same thing for men and women's role in child rearing, there are certain things you can't change. Yes, if women decide to breastfeed, right, and the child is basically attached to the woman for quite a while. I breastfed my twins until they were 18 months. And that means I couldn't work in an office for that long. No work will allow you to stop every 3 hours to breastfeed unless you have your own business, right? So those are the decisions that men and women need to make together. Talk about the plus and cons, talk about the solutions, talk about their deep desires and their feelings, and find support. If there's no family, can you hire some help, right? So whatever the decision is made, it should be made mutually. Feelings should be expressed and held and heard. And if, say, a woman is willingly to stay at home for a while to take care of the child, they decide this is the best for our family, then I don't think that women look at it as a sacrifice. It's a conscious decision they're making because they really value the well-being of their children. And that's what's best for the family, right? So I'm thinking about lesbian couples. One of them carry the baby, the other one work, right? Very similarly to men and women's role in that they still need to negotiate. And they have very similar challenges that a heterosexual couple have. The division of the labor. And when someone is out there working, their life, their circle is very different from someone who's staying at home. There's a disconnection happening there. So the couple need to work even harder to really connect with each other, not just on the children, talking about pee pee, poo poo, and feeding, right? They need to talk about us. What is your life outside? What is my life outside of the kids? Can I get a chance to read something I'm interested in? Can I talk to someone? Can I have a volunteer on the side? Anything that I'm still passionate about as a person outside the role of being a mother, being a father, being a worker, right? There are two real people there connecting with each other. So if you lose the sight of the peopleness, the human, you only focus on the roles, they're just robots. And it's hard to connect. You're just
that's interesting.
Take a different yeah.
People as opposed to roles.
Yeah, they have roles, but don't lose sight of your humanness.
So what came up for me in that example is that often when the person that, whether it's a woman or a man that is not with the baby, didn't give birth and goes to work, that person, when looks forward to being at home, whereas that person has sort of had enough of being at home, and may not be able to give that special welcome. Instead, may need that sort of a recognition or what there is tiredness in both cases, but there seems to be a need for the different roles to be acknowledged.
Yes, and be seen by both people, the effort. So for the one that's working outside, their stress of fighting, of competing, right? Of being worried and fearful of being fired if the economy is not well, where I'm not doing a good job. So there's a lot of pressure there. For the one stay at home, it's constant work and you're not getting paid. Nobody is saying, hey, you did a good job, the house is clean. You did a good job, your child turned out to be great, right? When they're babies, all you see is work after work and work and work and unfinished, always more work. And then it really drains you, right? So for both people, their world is so different. It's really hard to see each other. And that's sometimes therapy is needed to get them to see each other and see, oh, you're actually working towards the same goal. You just have different roles in your family, right?
I realize this is the first time we record the podcast, and we touched on so many sort of very profound situations, and maybe we can stay with this one rather than touching so many, because I find that when the large majority of couples that work with me, they come after they had the first baby, some of them after the second one. So that time when he or in the heterosexual couple or with a lesbian couple, or she comes back from the office or the workplace, that meeting is so challenging, and it very often goes badly and has repercussions, consequences, and the negative atmosphere lingers on for days. So maybe we can spend 5 minutes looking at this, all the multifacets of it. So different expectations. I'm going to relax at home, whereas the other person has been at home all day. Tiredness on both ends, but this unhelpful expectation that the other half may not be as tired as you are. And sort of really looking forward to something different. If you've been in the office, you're really looking forward to the sofa and some food and a glass of wine and a movie and maybe a smile. Maybe a smile. And often and maybe you get one of these five and the smile is an important one, but even there, who gives the smile first? And if there is no smile, the other person may become quite rigid. And
well, how about both people have a smile when they see each other? Well, it's about what you call into your mind when you see your partner. Do you see the father of your child? Do you see someone that works really hard for the family? Do you see someone is being sloppy and not helping, right? Or do you see someone who is not dressed up and doesn't look clean? Do you see someone just cranky and naggy, right? What do you see? Can you call back the memory, the first moment you see your partner, when your eyes met their eyes and the spark? Can you recall that person? Can you remember what are your common goals? What we are doing here? You're building something together and it has work involved. When you are building something together, there's always stress, there's always effort, there's always work, there's always going to be hindrance, right? Such is life. But why you together? Because you want to enjoy the good time, and you have to go through this bad time together, right? And that's, most people have a vow like that. You didn't vow to each other and say, we're just going to have a good time together all the time. You're going through all the stages of life together. And that's not only your suffering or your suffering, it's both of your suffering. But you know, when you have that connection, the suffering can be sweet in some way. It's a bittersweet feeling. Oh, look at him. He has gray hair now. You know, look at her. She has some wrinkles. Her hands used to be so tender. You know, now with all the rough work at home, her fingers got chapped or something. You see all those marks of aging, of work, of life on us, and you don't think about they're ugly. You think about we are working hard, and those are marks are from life, and we're going through it together. And I believe that's why people get into long-term committed relationships.
Right, that connection, that's really important. Maybe we can explore what makes a difference, what contributes to have that connection, not roles, but to the humanness of both, giving each other the benefit of the doubt. What helps in feeling that team, having that team spirit, not losing that team spirit, not ending up in your sort of feeling victimized or feeling let down, and becoming suspicious of the other person, which is the opposite of giving that person the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
So I find that with some colleagues, they often talk about secure attachments, or non-secure attachments, so the individual history. Perhaps I tend to always be more fascinated or alerted by the societal So let me give you this image, and maybe you can comment on this. So from a traditional society based on marriage, whether it's monotheistic from a Judeo-Christian Muslim tradition, or I'm not sure what in Asia you can comment, but I believe that long marriages are common in Asia as well traditionally.
Yes.
So in a traditional setup, and perhaps there is traditional men being a provider in a lot of this society. We probably don't have time to say how many exceptions there are to the rules. Maybe we can say, generally speaking, traditional societies in the West and Asia, the man tended to be the provider, financial provider, and the woman took care of the house and the children. So in that setup, if you're having a marital problem and you're having a coffee with a friend, the large majority of the community doesn't divorce. So there is peer pressure to work through difficulties, and it appears abnormal not to, to seek counseling, or ultimately to separate, to divorce.
Right.
Because the average person from the village, if you're having a coffee with them, would say, well, do what I've done. My spouse is not perfect. I haven't. And I feel like I live in the UK, but I'm exposed to, I suppose, North American influence from media and friends. The average friend, if you say that your feelings or needs have been neglected for a number of years, somebody that you would deem as friend, perhaps more often than not, you get the opposite advice. Well, you deserve better.
Right.
So I suppose I'm just saying this because the influence of our peers, I feel, plays a part in, and then eventually it's not just your feelings and your needs being neglected, but it's also that final conclusion. Have I been given a disservice? Have I been let down? Was this fair? Then if the answer is no, it wasn't fair. Yes, I've been let down. No, I didn't deserve this. It's more likely to then separate. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Peers, sometimes mentor figures, right? Or parents and families. We are in systems. We have influence from other people around us all the time, especially those who were trusted, right? And I think it's important for friends to stay neutral, and to support whatever decision that person suffering will make, right? They can talk about what they see, they can talk about what they know about this particular person, but they're not therapists. I would just say quit giving advices, right? And really what needed is for the two people who are in this relationship to work it out. Even if they're not going to stay, they need to work it out and talk about it with each other, not to get other people to stay in their team. And then there are two teams, and next thing you know, two teams are fighting now. My friend told me that you shouldn't be doing that. My friend said that you are not respecting. That's not very helpful. You triangulated all the other people into your tribe, right? And then you become enemies now. You forgot you have the same goal. You are on the same team, and you have an internal dispute that you need to solve between the two of you. Not saying you shouldn't go to complain with other people and dance, get it out, which is also healthy. But you're the one that knows exactly what's going on in your relationship. They don't know. They're outsiders. They hear what you say. The narrative you have is also biased when you're complaining, right? You don't talk about how they're doing well. You generally just say, oh, they don't do this, they don't do that. And I do all this, always, right? I hear that in front of me all the time for the couples, right? They talk about, I always do this, you don't do that at all. And it's so black and white, right? So when you're stuck in the black or white, you are not in yourself, not in your adult self, who can be curious and open and to see what's outside of that view, that lens. You're really stuck, right? So in order for people to really work it out, they need to have some access to their energy in the self to stay neutral, can observe, be open, and what might be I'm not seeing here, I don't know here. I might be open and willing to change a little bit from what I've been doing that's not working. But when people get stuck in their own role, sometimes they're very immature parts of them, right? They cannot be open. And it's also like playing chess. You know, one person say, okay, bishop this way, this person's queen, and it's like bishop back, queen back. They just keep doing the same move, and nobody is making progress. At some point, someone needs to say, no, we're not playing anymore, we're not going anywhere. Or they just get stuck in this cycle, they just can't get out of it, and they both get really frustrated and suffering, right? So I think as a couple therapist, my job is to get them to see this. What are you doing here? And it's not working, and you're suffering. Can we take it back? Can we be open with something that's different from this move you're doing? It may lead to you lose or I lose, but that's not the goal of you being together. Your goal is to work on your relationship and move forward, not to be stuck in the same place.
I wonder whether we could end this podcast, last 5 minutes, on whether non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy being an example of a very, well, a non-traditional example, non-traditional societies. Well, you know, the two scenarios I gave before, I like that you kept really neutral. You know, friends should be neutral as well, ideally. But I also approach that very neutrally. There is so much to say about staying in marriages that we've done that historically to the detriment of our freedom, liberties, and happiness. And there is also this new territory of, which is a bit unknown, of when do you give up on a commitment that you've made for the long term. I feel like historically we need to learn.
I can comment on that when you say you do not know, right? So sometimes when I have couples come to me, one of them want to leave the relationship. Either they're very overtly express that, or they covertly, I can sense that, right? And sometimes they shift. And when they go to therapy, one kind of want to leave, and the other say, no, stay. And then at some point they shift, right? So there's a form of therapy called discernment counseling. That's short term, that deals with this ambiguity and ambivalence in the couples. So each person have many parts. There's a part of them want to stay, part of them want to leave. So when the two people's parts that want to leave join each other and get too big, dominate the same system, they separate. But a lot of times they're juggling with all those many parts, and then they're suffering. They were like, there's so much anxiety, not knowing what to happen, right? So they need to go through that process to figure it out. Are we going to work on a relationship? Are we leaving? What is it that we want to do? They need to talk about that first. Otherwise, couples therapy is not very effective because they are not really doing their work. I noticed that they are not motivated. They're not doing the work. They don't do homework. They don't want to change. They're just stuck in there. So outside of that, you're saying, what is ethical non-monogamy a solution, right, to the crisis of couples have?
But my premise was in the example of the traditional society, the default was not to dissolve a marriage. With ethical non-monogamy, is exciting because the rules are to be discussed, created, rediscussed, re-examined on a constant basis. And I find that those who are in this type of relationship actually often approach counseling earlier rather than later, because they realize that there isn't a blueprint of it's not a
the structure is not
relationship.
there.
Yes.
Yeah, they have to co-create together, yet a time after time, right? So what my experience of counseling couples in ethical non-monogamous relationships are, the majority of them are suffering. The majority of them are not doing it right, and they're not successful. There's a lot of drama, there's a lot of hurt, right? Why? Well, I do have couples that are very successfully practicing ethical non-monogamy. So there are a couple criteria I see. Number one, they're in a securely attached relationship. So they have so much trust in each other. They feel safe with each other. They're not seeking other people to meet their unmet needs in this relationship. So in order to do non-monogamy really well, you have to be really good at monogamous relationship. You have to be very solid in that, building your attachment. Number two, they're both very good communicators. They are attached, they're connected with their own feelings, their own desires and needs. They have the words to express to each other. They have already developed this pattern of back and forth positive interaction with each other, right? Because there's so many things you need to talk about when you have a multiple partners. It's just a reality, right? Number three, they have to be both very organized, because a lot of calendaring happening, especially when there are children involved, right? Multiple partners, that calendar organization is important. If someone is not very good at keep track of things, it's not going to work. Number four is that both of them are very energetic, curious people. They actually looking to meet other people, to connect with this part of them, to expand their life, but not to seek out unmet needs from other people. So with all of that together, this couple can be very successful. They're having so much fun in their primary attachment relationship and with other people, and they're expanding, they're learning, they're sociable, they're having a good time. But that doesn't happen most of the time. What I see mostly is that people are unclear with their communication and their expectation. They do not know what the practice is, and they end up not disclose everything. They don't talk about everything. There are a lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication, a lot of hurt, drama. It's not pleasant to see. So it can be a solution if you practice it well.
So today it was our first podcast, I guess, that we both felt to have a discussion that is as general and comprehensive as possible. And obviously, when we do that, we can't really zero in and go deep in any of them. But I feel like if we were to sort of summarize some of the commonalities, we talked about values, ideally being discussed earlier in the relationship, our different values, and then roles are based on those values, and there are multiple roles in the nuclear families that we often expect a lot, that the other half scores high in many erroneously set themselves up for failure. Right. And we talked about some couples being more traditional, some others being less traditional, and the need to discuss these values, roles, and expectation even more when there isn't a history and a previous generation to refer to in terms of what's fair to expect, what's not fair to expect. Do you feel like this is a fair summary? Would you like to add anything?
Yes. Well, you are so good at this, Francesco. You just recapped everything in this like short paragraph. I really had a good time chatting with you.
Yes. I just felt for the listeners, I wasn't so focused during the podcast to know what was the core of our discussion. I thought at the end, let me at least do it at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Until the next one.
Right. Looking forward to the next one.
Same here. Thank you, Yi.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesco.